Friends, glad to welcome you to the project No Questions Asked. Today we will be doing a very interesting review on my video in which I made water move.
Yes, my friends, hello everyone. I welcome everyone to the No Questions project. And today's topic, it's incredibly interesting because a huge number of haters, a huge number of skeptics were very much asking for telekinesis with water at one time. And in fact, this is at this point the only video on the channel that has an impact on water. I think we're going to hear a lot of interesting things from Ernst today about exactly how this video was made and exactly what techniques were used to pull it off.
Friends, I'm happy to welcome you to my new video. Today, I'm going to show you perhaps one of the most difficult skills in the history of superpowers. Friends, today I'm going to make the water in the glass move in the glass using telekinesis. And just so you don't think I'm just wobbling the table, I've set up two glasses. One will not be the target. With the power of telekinesis, and the other one, which is closer to me, will now be energized, and the water should start to bubble. As you can see, there are two cameras working, one from far away and one close, so that everyone can see. Now pay attention. In fact, I will say confess and repent that I was a little bit off on the timing. The thing is that I shot this video at one of my seminars, where I personally worked. Where they are held, unfortunately, I can't tell you. There was no one in the room, but my seminar started in 2 hours, and I had to leave after that. I had filmed 4 other different seats before that. That was, I think, the last thing I filmed. Actually, the idea was to funnel this water, but I just didn't have the time or energy. And yet, I managed to do it. If you look closely at this video, you'll see that I put 2 glasses, and both glasses are on the same plane. That is, if there was a vibration on this plane, on this table, the water would start shaking in the 2 glasses. But it only started bubbling in one, because I only started to affect it. But again, there were skeptics who said that there was a vibrator or some kind of induction device under the table, which created some kind of vibrations. Strange, of course, to me. Why didn't it create vibrations for the other glass? However, I'll tell you how it really was. The thing is, I've never been able to lift water in the shape of a ball. And I can't explain to myself why I can't. To form this shape and holding it, pulling it out. Somehow I felt like I could do it. But the workouts before that were about 10 to 15 minutes, because I knew that I had to pack my things, go to the seminar, and then we would go home. And I just didn't have enough strength, concentration, energy, and time to do what I wanted to do. And so I just started moving the water in some amorphous way, grabbing it and loosening it up a little bit, So let's just say that if I were asked what is harder to lift, for example, a 500-pound motor or to form a water ball, I would now clearly say that the water is harder to lift than an object. Why? Because an object has some particular plane that you can grab onto, and you can create a certain vision. What can you grab onto? It's incredibly difficult with the water. So what I showed, for me, that was my record. Although a lot of people, of course, didn't realize that it was very difficult. A lot of people laughed. They said it was all like shaking a table leg. But in fact, it was a very difficult performance, a very difficult technique. And I'm truly sorry that I didn't capture what I wanted to. But maybe someday I'll get to it and capture that moment when I try to lift a big drop out of the water. Hopefully I'll be able to do that. And the interesting thing is that even a moment like my hands didn't help me capture the water. It's actually the formation of this image is incredibly difficult for an amorphous object. I mean, there's no definite shape in water wherefrom that you can create a double that you put on an object and you try to lift it up. This is much easier to do with a solid object than with some gaseous or liquid object. So friends, if you can do something like this, I would be very happy to see your videos. I'll be very happy to comment on it. And of course, if you do something like this, I'll be happy to post it on my channel with a link to you.
Have you ever seen anyone, maybe Anna or someone you met at a seminar, could exactly lift a ball of water or a ball of dirt or, I don't know, a ball of earth or something?
A ball of dirt, yes. A ball of water, no. The most I've seen is spinning. I mean, creating a vortex in the dirt. It hasn't worked that way for me. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out that way for me yet. But I'm hoping I'll get to that point. Arne didn't do it because for him it was, he rarely demonstrated that kind of thing at all. And I sincerely hope that I get access to certain videos so that I can manage to put them on the channel at some point. His old videos where he demonstrated his levitation, he did it very, very reluctantly. I had to beg him directly. I remember now that there was one video where I was following him, holding the camera, and I asked him to get up. He just took a couple steps and walked through the air and further down. Lucky for me, I had the camera. And much to my regret, that video was left with Arnie and is now in the archives. But hopefully I'll be able to get it someday, at least partially, because basically I am the author of this video. I shot it. But, as I said, I don't have it in me to lift the drops out of the water. There may have been masters who did that. And the ball from the earth, the ball from the dirt, I saw exactly the energy, the accumulation, the creation of the ball, not in water, unfortunately.
Ernst, there is another question. Sometimes people on the channel ask to demonstrate telekinesis with some living object. I mean, I don't know, with a cat, with a dog, with something else. Something. I know you've refused to do that. Can you comment on why?
I can comment and explain. The thing is that I love animals very much, and for me there is no difference between a hamster, a rat, a cat, a dog, a rhinoceros, an elephant. To me, all animals are absolutely equal in importance to nature and to me. And in fact, if you do telekinesis on some animal, you can unintentionally damage its physical body very much by affecting its subtle body, a dog or a cat or a hamster that you're going to lift. Because a dog is quite difficult, it weighs a lot. Another point is that if the animal starts to twitch, it jumps out of its visual double, which you put on, and such as a small turtle or a hamster, they are not so fast, not so bright. You can hold them, you can capture them, but they get so hurt that they just don't allow conscience. They don't allow that kind of nurturing to be done. Because I love animals and I have never hurt any animal. Therefore, I will never do that.
Ernst, but you're talking about this with obvious familiarity with the subject. You've seen this kind of telekinesis somewhere before, right?
Yes, Daniela, that's exactly right. I've seen this telekinesis performed by other masters. I've seen this animal suffer. I made a vow to myself that I would never replicate something like that. The animal was in a lot of pain. After that, it just couldn't walk at all for a couple hours. I'm not going to tell you what it was like right now. It was one of the rodents and it was just laying there. I thought it was dead. But thankfully, he survived. I nursed him back to health a little bit, gave him food for a couple days, then let him out into nature. But still, it was a brutal blunt for me. I made a vow to myself that I would never do that to a living thing.
Ernst, what about telekinesis with humans? A lot of illusionists, magicians demonstrate lifting a person. Chris Angel does it. Yes, Dynamo does it, if I remember correctly.
There are two varieties. One variety is like a trick, the other variety is like telekinesis. But a man who works in the circus, he agrees to certain conditions. If something is done to him, he consents to it. An animal that works in a circus does not give any consent for its training or any other numbers. So, if a person who is really a helper of this performer agrees to do the actual telekinesis, then of course he's absolutely aware of the possible pains, the possible disturbances in coordination of movement, possible circulatory problems. If the person is just from the audience, however, it's usually not really what you and I are talking about. It's more illusion than a real circus. But if it is a person from his team, then with him you can make a really real Sith. Really raise him, he will know, he will be ready for that. Well, and then the person can tune into it and already be, let's say, ready, so that his subtle field is not too susceptible to this particular influence of the double.
Ernst, can you tell me, for those who are not in the subject at all, but if you take human levitation, if a person does, as it were, yes, levitation over himself, does he experience any negative sensations in the body or not?
No. If a person does levitation as a self-levitation, he just does a certain blob of energy, let's say, creates a certain clump of energy that he can balance on. A balance on a piece of air, as it is also called. And in doing so, the person does not experience any pain. And the person does not experience any health problems because there is no influence directly from the outside on his double. If he works by himself, well, as if few people can really cause harm to themselves, for example, like breaking their own arm at will or cutting off a finger. So, as a rule, a person is always focused on the instinct of self-preservation. Therefore, he will always save himself in such situations and not to hurt himself. If he suddenly feels that some pain is unbearable, he will simply stop. Therefore, when people ask me, for example, what is easier, to make regular levitation or to make a person levitate with telekinesis, of course it is easier and more useful for a person to make normal levitation. Because a person does it by himself, he knows what he is doing, he knows how he approaches it. If another person tries to do it on him, then here he can really just disturb his work, the work of internal organs, the work of blood circulation, up to some serious diseases connected with the penetration of the subtle field. So, from my side, I will say that levitation is a useful thing, but if a person really does telekinesis even against the will of another person, then it's already to their detriment. Friends, if you are interested in the subject of siddhis, the subject of superpowers, we're happy to tell you that we have a group where we train people. And we provide training from the very beginning. That is, you get a base that gradually progresses to sifts such as telekinesis, pyrokinesis, levitation. At some point, we will even cover higher siddhas, such as teleportation. So don't miss your chance. Whoever is interested, subscribe. The link to the recording will be in the description. Friends, we will be glad to see you in our group. Friends, I thank you for your attention. I hope this information helped someone. If you were interested, put a like, subscribe to our channel, click on the bell to not miss the next issues. There will still be a lot of interesting things here. See you soon.